They are coming. Deep within the bowels of the underground levels beneath Guangzhou, a lone man stood before a crowd of dirty factory workers. His pure white hair, blue eyes, and pale skin was hidden by a robe and a hood as he gazed upon the dirty Martians. This man would become known as Pathfinder, one of the founding members of the Red Front, and a pivotal member in the history of Mars to come. In the weeks following the disastrous battle of Orion's landing on the moon, the data network had gone dark. Majority of social media, news outlets, and basic communications between the colonies had been blacked out by the government of Earth, and Pathfinder knew why. The EDF was on their way to Mars. So far, the Martian war for independence had gone incredibly well for them. They had struck a devastating blow to the government of Earth, to show that they were not invincible, and that tens of thousands of EDF troopers had already died on Mars. To make matters worse for the government of Earth, numerous riots across the colonies erupted as many citizens saw their own family members killed by the EDF, and rightfully so began protesting. The EDF did not respond well to this, of course. Following the events of the massacre at New Washington, dozens of protests and riots across the solar system were put down violently, as casualties by civilian populace rose within the hundreds, on some planets even in the thousands. And it was this righteous fury that Pathfinder clung to. You see, Pathfinder wasn't a general, he wasn't a fighter, nor was he a diplomat. The best way to describe Pathfinder would be an intelligence agent. Now, the exact origin of Pathfinder is unknown, whether he was a defected Earth intelligence agent, or perhaps he was a smuggler or hacker from the pirate network that decided to start all of this, we don't know. What we do know, though, is that he was able to bring together multiple agencies, organizations, and guilds across Mars into one united front, the Red Front. Once the Red Front had been established on Mars with leadership in place, it was time to stir up the populace. And so, Pathfinder stood before the group of factory workers about to give his first speech, will go down in history as the opening remarks of the leader of the Red Front. To quote Pathfinder, "Sons and daughters of Mars, I come to you not as a stranger, but as a friend. I know what is coming. I know what the EDF is capable of. I have spent my life fighting these monsters, and it troubles me deeply knowing what they have in store for this beautiful planet. I come both to warn you and to seek your help. In the coming months, the EDF is going to land here. They are going to destroy your infrastructure. They are going to take people prisoner without any verdict or warrant. They are going to search every inch of this planet until they find every last member of the Red Front. Now, some of you say this is our fate due for starting this war. And to you, I say this simply. We did not start this war. We may have landed the first blow, but they were the ones who caused the first bloodshed. You all remember the massacre at New Washington, how 50 of our siblings were brutally put down by military police. Even as we speak, dozens more massacres are occurring across our solar system. How many more body bags have to be filled? How many more graves have to be dug? How many more homes have to be destroyed before you people do something? I am begging you, imploring you to stand with us. Not for righteous cause, not for gain or profit, but because we all know this is right. The time has come to throw off the yoke of tyranny." Pathfinder, September 15th, 2283. While a large majority of the factory workers wound up joining the Red Front, Pathfinder still had a major problem. Majority of the population on Mars was against this war, and for good reason. To understand their lack of enthusiasm for fighting Earth, we have to go back and understand how Mars came about. For the past 300 years, the Martians had slowly built. Mars itself was one of the hardest planets to colonize. Nothing grew there, and there was very finite resources. Everything had to be shipped in or grown organically in a vast array of infrastructure meant to support life. And while this created a culture of self-dependence and fierce fierce pride in their lineage as Martians, it didn't necessarily incline them to armed conflict with Earth. Majority of Martians at the time still believed that they could have reasonable diplomatic negotiations with Earth. And so Pathfinder came up with a strategy, knowing how the EDF was going to react when they got on planet side. Instead of openly attacking the EDF as they landed on Mars, he would instead wait and bide his time, allowing the EDF to show their true colors. On December 1st, 2283, the EDF landed on Mars, and so Pathfinder's strategy unfolded almost perfectly. To understand the ferocity in which the EDF landed on Mars, you need to look at how they viewed this conflict. Majority of the EDF troopers on their voyage to Mars went over recordings and journal entries from their brothers and sisters that had been massacred on the moon. From the EDF troopers' perspective, the Martians were cunning, sly terrorists that were waiting in the shadows to slit their throats, blow them up in their barracks, and there was no possibility for negotiation. And while some of that might have been true, it made them react to the average citizen of Mars in a very vindictive and cruel way. The moment the EDF got off their transports, despite the rather warm welcome that the Martians gave them, martial law was almost instantly in place with stringent curfews. The EDF wasted absolutely no time in beginning an utter campaign of dominance and brutal search and seizure. Within the first month of the EDF presence on Mars, multiple houses were broken into, hundreds of people were taken without warrant or reason, and by the end of the second month, already some of the key infrastructure that was meant to help support life on Mars was being destroyed. And what I mean by that is the EDF would purposely go into eco farms and factories, and they would ransack the place. Now, this doesn't sound too bad until you account for the fact that the average eco farm on Mars was a highly specialized and super controlled environment meant to grow crops, oxygen, minerals, insert resource here. Even a small detriment to that highly controlled environment would cost the Martians months of productivity. So when a bunch of EDF troopers come in and turn the place upside down, it inevitably causes a deep impact on the Martian psyche. Their very brittle, complex, and robust system of life sustainment was now in jeopardy by these foreign invaders, and this is exactly what Pathfinder knew was going to happen. As the EDF began to vindictively search and seize Martian property, instilling brutal curfews and martial law, a particular incident came about that would begin the drastic shift in Martian attitude towards the EDF, and this would become known as the Massacre at Pharos 1. On January 15th, the Air Force of the EDF, along with a division of Marines, conducted a brutal raid on Pharos 1. Now, the logic behind this raid was very simple. The commander on ground, General Butler, believed that Pharos 1 was directly aiding, providing logistics and supplies to the Red Front. Now, this wasn't entirely an accurate claim. Majority of life sustainment plants on Mars were in some way, shape, or form providing logistics or support to the Red Front, but wasn't necessarily a facility-wide effort so much as onesies or twosies scientists or warehouse clerks slipping away a box of water here or a box of food there to their friends in the Red Front. However, even such a small effort on the EDF's side was seen as a complete betrayal of Martian loyalty to Earth, and so they turned Pharos 1 into an example. Majority of the terraformists, the scientists in charge of leading terraforming process on Mars, were brutally killed. The survivors were gunned down by machine guns. Fleeing workers and scientists from Pharaohs 1 could be seen from satellite being gunned down by the EDF, and they were shown no quarter. Now, unfortunately for the EDF, they didn't get everyone. One of the survivors of Pharaohs 1, who went by the name of Hank, would become one of the most famous and important members of Martian history. And for good reason. You see, he would become the voice of revolution. Again, Pathfinder himself was not a general. He wasn't a commander. He was more a facilitator. And he knew, as the EDF burned, scorched, and pillaged their way across Mars, people like Hank would rise. And so, directly after the massacre of Pharaohs 1, Pathfinder and his top agents went out into the Martian desert to find Hank. After days of searching, they were able to locate the terraformists in a cave. Now, it did take some convincing, but eventually Pathfinder was able to convince Hank that he was a friendly, and this would turn the war against Earth, and it would drastically bring public favor into the Martian Red Front side. And here's why. Hank, already, even before the events of Pharaohs 1, was an extremely impactful member of Martian culture. He was one of the staunchest voices for peace. He was a convicted pacifist. He genuinely believed that this war was a waste of human life and that you could find an amicable end to the fighting. All of this opinion, however, was wiped out as Hank witnessed his wife and children be slaughtered at the hands of the EDF Marines. And this is why Pathfinder didn't have to try too hard to convince Hank to come to his side, the Red Front. All Pathfinder truly had to do was provide Hank shelter, equipment, and a microphone. Overnight, Hank transformed from being the voice of reason, the voice of ambiguity and peace, into one of the staunchest revolutionaries of Mars. And because he was already well known among the Martian populace, it was Hank's voice that began to push regular everyday Martians towards the side of the Red Front. As if public relations wasn't a nightmare enough for the EDF, they decided to make things worse for themselves. Shortly after the events of Pharaohs 1, when it was discovered that Hank was the one broadcasting his revolutionary lectures, they decided to declare him public enemy number 1. Now, this is the equivalent of, let's say, Martha Stewart or Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? Let's say this was someone that we knew in our time shortly after America got invaded, and prior to that invasion, even during, they're saying, hey, let's talk things out. Let's see what we can do. Look, we don't need to fight. And now they're on your TV screaming about how we need to fight to the bitter end. This is effectively what happened with Hank and the EDF, and it was perfect for Pathfinder. You see, it didn't take much time for Hank's words of encouragement and revolution to begin stirring the rabble, to begin gathering people and uniting them against a common foe. For reference, prior to the event of Pharaohs 1, Martian society was still rather divided. You had the Chinese sector, you had the American sector, the Soviet sector, along with many other, we'll call them city-states, so to speak, multiple isolated outposts who believed in their own individual identity. All of these things were kind of mushed together, united, and the Martian identity began to emerge in complete contrast to the EDF invasion. And an invasion it soon was becoming. Seeing public support for the Red Front and Hank growing, General Butler began instilling even more drastic countermeasures against protests, effectively banning protesting. It got so bad between the blackout regarding social media, the utter control of the news outlets, and the martial law patrols within cities that fighting between regular civilians and the armed forces of the EDF exploded overnight, and the Red Front hadn't even truly started fighting yet. So far, so good for Pathfinder. He had his revolutionary voice now, and he was beginning to combine all these many different individualistic society aspects into one front. And this is a trend that will continue throughout this conflict. Over and over and over, the EDF would underestimate, and they would view their enemy, the Red Front, as simply a terrorist cell. They refused to even fathom the possibility that an entire planet of human beings would rally together with one cause, one government, and one army to fight them back. And all of this is why, in episode 3, the war between Mars and Earth will begin in earnest. This has been Simon, welcome to Soapbox, and thank you so much for watching. If you like this series, or if you want to support the channel, I highly encourage you to like and share. As a friendly reminder, this is lore from my book, The Golden Lance. It's just the prologue. We haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. There is over 600 years of history leading up to the events of my book, and I can't wait to publish this work. That being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good day. Welcome to the Soapbox.